can go. So, Kevin, no. Screen here.
Welcome everyone to tonight's council meeting. Before the meeting starts, we'll be hosting a public forum. Just to mention the public forum that will be held, there will be two speakers. This public forum is being recorded, and note that it is held in accordance with Section 4 of the Code of Meeting Practice for councillors, staff and delegates, and the conduct of speakers must be accordingly afforded to that section. Speakers must limit their presentation to specified business paper item, and they will have 5 minutes to present their position. At the completion of the 5 minutes, the councillors may take an opportunity to ask questions of the speakers, and that will invite the speakers to stand at the lectern in front of us here. So to kick it off, the first speaker is Mr. Paul Timmermans, and he is the item 13.1, DA 10.2020.3765.1 at 46 Tweed Court, Faguna multi-dwelling house. Before we start that, I'll advise that the public forum is being recorded for administrative purposes. By speaking at the public forum, you agree to being recorded. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this public forum, that you're respectful to other people and use appropriate language. Albury City accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the public forum. Mr. Timmermans, if you can make your way up to the lectern, thank you. Just tap the end of it. No. Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for having me this evening. Just like to say hello. I'm my wife and Carolyn and I, we live next door to the proposed development that we're going to go through tonight. Firstly, I'd just like to thank the council for the last 18 months for the amount of work they've put into reviewing the documents that have all been presented, in particular Mr. Marius Shepherd, who's spent a lot of time on this job. And we would like to just reiterate that the planning department is requesting that we refuse this application, and we're all in agreement with that. Sorry, I'll turn this on too. Rightio. So the first comment was we agree that the development is not consistent with the existing character of the area. You can see there's a map of Iluka views showing the large lot living estate and the three very small blocks that are stuck right in the middle of it is a proposed development. It's just not in character with the whole area of Faguna in that particular location. We also agree that the development does not meet the passive solar design and the climate management. This is a diagram showing how all the local houses around the development all have an east-west aligned house, which gives them great access to the northern sun. Two of the three proposed houses are actually north-south facing and don't attract any of the good sunlight that we get at any time of the year. We also agree that it does not meet the sunlight access requirements of the DCP 2010. The houses are very close together. They're raised up high. They're close to boundaries and they actually block each other's sunlight. That's also in council's report. You can see here the three houses that are planned for that one block. Then some of the houses, like the middle one, is much higher than the one on the left, and it just completely overshadows each other. The first house on lot A, it has a huge retainer wall, a fence on top, and which is even higher than the gutter on the fence. So it's actually overshadowing itself. We also agree that development is not consistent with the design guidelines for primary setback as compared to all the other houses in the area. Like our house on the diagram below, our garage is nearly 11 metres from the boundary. The proposed houses, such as the one which will be right next door to us, is only 7.3 metres. That doesn't meet that minimum primary setback. We also agree that the site, owing to its location, orientation and topography, is not suited to the development. Because of the way they are angling the blocks and have to put the houses on them, they have to put a lot of fill in and raise the houses up high. This causes overshadowing and privacy issues to our house and also to each other. We also agree that the development will have an unacceptable impact on the amenity of the adjoining property owners in the locality. It'll cause unacceptable solar shadow onto our home and also cause unacceptable loss of privacy to our home. You can see here's a couple of photos. The one on the left, that's our living area where the nice sunlight comes in during winter. And you can see there, that's the 2 days before winter solstice, that sun is beaming into our living areas, making it nice and warm. We've got a 6.3 star rated house. It's something we want to keep. Having all that sunlight helps us. You can see this is the diagram that came with the development application, that the houses will overshadow our house, providing the loss of sunlight into our living areas. The other issue we have is that the houses are so close to the boundary. They're only 3 metres from the fence, and they're built up at least around about 1 metre up above the natural ground level, which means they'll be overlooking directly into our living areas and our entertainment areas. So apart from the privacy issues, this is why the sunlight gets blocked out into our house. We've also got some safety concerns regarding the traffic. For the house on the left that's proposed, they're bringing the fence right up to the corner of the block, just to try and increase their entertainment area, which means the line of sight when you come up to that corner is you lose a lot compared to the house that's on the left across the street. For a normal corner block, they've cut their fence in towards the house, and there's a good line of sight there for traffic, whereas the development is actually going to reduce that viewing around the corner. So in conclusion, yeah, we support the council's planning department, their recommendation to refuse this application, and we'd like all councillors to vote that way. Thank you.
Thank you,
Any
Mr.
questions?
Timmermans. Questions? Thanks, councillors. No? Yes, councillor Doxey.
Mr. Mayor, well, currently there's 3 houses proposed.
Yep.
Would 2 make a difference to your stance on this?
I'd have to see what they were proposing. If they're still just as close to the fence and up high, and they're still knocking all our sunlight out, then I'd oppose that. If they're set well back and don't affect us, then that's all right.
Yeah, fair comment. Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Just one, Mr. Timmermans, in relation, I think from the original forum we had, seems like forever ago.
About a year ago.
We asked you, or I asked you about the elevation of your home and the natural topography of that block.
Yeah.
It seems to be dug down. Is that an assumption, or was just the way the block sloped?
So, yeah, so my block has a slight slope on it. Our southern boundary is on natural ground level. So we've followed that on the south. On the north, we've had to dig down about 800 millimetres into the ground. So it's only about this
Oh,
high.
okay.
Yeah.
Yep, no worries. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, next speaker is Kim Packer, and it's the same item, and she does not support the recommendations.
Sorry. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I'm Kim Packer and my husband, Luke Packer. I'm a little out of my comfort zone tonight, but unfortunately I was hoping that Matt Johnson from Habitat Planning was going to come and present to you tonight. Unfortunately, he's had to go on leave. So firstly, I'd like to thank you for your time this evening. As you're no doubt aware, the planners have advised you to refuse our development at Tweed Court. We're here tonight this evening to kindly ask you to approve our application. Okay, my husband and I have lived in Albury our whole life, and we've raised 4 young children here. When we purchased this block, given its zoning, we honestly thought it was a good business decision, and we never thought we would be met with such haste as we have been met with residents of Tweed Court. We have done our best to address concerns previous to the last forum. We honestly come back and we thought we're okay. And unfortunately, our development has gained a lot of public attention. So our original application was for a 3-lot subdivision and one dwelling. We were advised that if we could come back with 3 residences drawn up, you would reconsider. Please note that the original petition was signed by 59 individuals and council received 15 submissions. Now, after being re-notified, there is another petition and they've now received 19 submissions, some of which didn't object to the original one. If you can go to number 2, please. Okay, so I drove out to Tweed Court today and took some photos. So they are up to date and they are current of what they look like. So the top one is of Tweed Court. The house at the top there, that's actually been there for a few years. As you can see, it's still not completely developed or finished. The fences, so it's on the southern side, this one here. They're actually Tweed Court. They run down Tweed Court, one of which is 140 metres of colour bond fencing, 1.8 metres high, because they're all the side access streets. So there is no house frontage or ranch styles that are presented onto Tweed Court when you look at that. As for the residents' objections regarding the development and how long it will take, that is Tweed Court today. That is the end of Tweed Court with a lot of development happening and a lot of cars. The residents have objected and said, you know, we're going to build one property that's going to get finished where they're going to start the next one. That's not the case. We've put in a proposal of a 3-lot subdivision and to build 3 houses at the same time, which will then cut down the construction time and noise, which was a concern of the residents. The other thing is they keep showing you aerial views. As I drove around today, I've taken eye height views. They keep looking down at everything. This is the block sizes, this is the sheds. When you drive out there, which I hope you have, it's been in the pipeline for 18 months. You know, it's when you look at the street, that is what you see. You see fences. There is houses in the adjoining street, which is in Nordack Street. Their facades are 11 metres wide. They discuss these massive ranch homes that they're building out there. Yes, that is on what side? I've got it here. On the upper side, where they do, you see a few ranch homes. If you want to proceed to number 3, please, if possible. Okay, so this is the property next door to us that's just been constructed. Like I said, this is today. They have built their block up almost, well, it's higher than 1.8 metres. So they now have a flat block. This fence in the corner here is Paul and Carolyn Timmermans. What are we to do? That is overshadowing. They are looking in at their swimming pool, at their shed. We honestly believe by subdividing our block, tiering our block, it steps by 3, it is of a benefit to the Timmermans. We will have the lower side, then and it gradually tiers up the block. If we do what our neighbours have done, by rights, that was approved by council, that has been built. We did meet with Mr. Timmermans prior to all this development to discuss the retaining boundary fences. And as soon as we mentioned a 3-lot subdivision, the conversation was ended. He then proceeded to build a 1.2 metre retaining wall at its highest point. It is tiered inside his block. So, okay. So to our next one, number 3, please. Is there a number 3? Or was that number 3? Sorry, no, sorry, number 4. Okay, so this is Hastings Street where Mr. and Mrs. Timmermans live. As you can see, this is their house at the bottom. It does look quite high, but the left-hand side is, you know, it's dug down a little bit. This is a fence. So sheds are often visible from the street as shown in this image. And it does have notable impact on the streetscape, which is quite a concern for all the residents. The fact that houses are not always present to the street, as seen in Hastings Street here and Tweed Court, 1 lot away from our block. This street is, this fence, that's 1 lot away. A house on Hastings Street does have a setback of 5.6 metres, and 8 Hastings Street, which is opposite our development, has a setback of 4.5 metres. Okay, if you want to go to number 1, please. So number 1, is that one? It is, sorry, this is Nordack Street. Okay, so as you can see in the top picture up there, that is, as you turn into Tweed Court, that is the first thing you will met with, a huge colorbond fence from the start of Tweed Court to the end. It is 33 metres long, 1.8 metres high. Okay, so that is the same side as what we are proposing. The facades on these homes in Nordic Street are between 11 and 12 and 15 metres wide. They're not the huge lot sizes that these aerial views keep showing you, because some have already been subdivided and cut in half. So, okie doke. And then, sorry, number 4, please. That one, so that's the long fence. And then, sorry, lucky last. Sorry, just trying to get organised. Number 5, thanks. So this is Tweed Court. These are 2 developments that we've already done. As you can see, if you look at some of the other homes in Tweed Court, they're yet to be finished. This is the standard that we are doing. They keep saying these substandard homes, the proposed dwellings will be constructed very similar materials and landscape just the same. And that, so hopefully looking at this and looking at a bird's eye view is very different to driving down the street and seeing what you get. You get massive amounts of colorbond fencing on the lower side, and on the high side, yes, you get these 2 houses and a few ranch homes, and at the other end, houses that are still under construction. So I beg you to reconsider what council have requested. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions? Thanks. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you. You've heard that there's concerns about shadowing and overshadowing. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's a real issue?
I don't think it's an issue. I actually think it's a benefit that we've tiered the block. We've gone all the minimums, like it's compliant, it's minimums. The residents out there have suggested that let's build a big ranch home and sheds, tennis courts. That's why they've got large allotments. That is of no benefit to Mr. Timmermans. No matter what, when you look at the sunlight that's coming through in his pictures, if we build any house there, that is going to stop that sunlight because it's dug down in the block. That's not just because we're building or cutting into 3. We could build a big house that, you know, the facade starts on Hastings Street and tier all the way back there and built up like the adjoining property on Tweed Court with all that fill. And we, like I said, we did meet with Mr. Timmermans to discuss this real issue that he's on the lower side. What can we do to stop these issues that are now happening? Because ultimately, what are we meant to build? No matter what, we are going to If we build a house, we could have a big shed that is plonked there on the corner of Hastings Street. We're allowed to do that. That's going to give a lot of overshadowing. Or do we not do anything and put a park in? Because he's bought a block of land knowing there is going to be development uphill from him. I honestly don't know what we're to do. We could build a 60 square home and there will be severe overshadowing. We've done our best.
Any other questions, councillors? No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your
Thanks for your time.
presentation, and thank you for us to allow us to consider this item in the
Thank you.
agenda as we get through the evening. Thanks again. Okay, well, that concludes our public forum. We will start the meeting, and we'll start the council meeting for Monday, the 25th October 2021. And we could all stand for the prayer. Thanks. Lord, we ask that you guide us in our decision making, protect us in the community we serve from all that is evil, and strengthen our unity for the welfare of the city. Amen. Amen. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land that we meet upon today, and pay my respects to the elders, past, present and future, for they hold the memories, culture and tradition and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in our community. Thank you. Okay, just need to inform you that this council meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this council meeting, you are respectful of other people and use appropriate language. Albury City accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of the council meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declaration received by the chair and disclosure of political donations. I have no conflict of interest declaration. Ms. Squire, did you wish to speak to the latter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to advise councillors, the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979, section 10.4 requires a person submitting planning applications or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donation and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of council. Reportable political donations include those of or above $1,000. The disclosure statement forms are available on Council's website or from the Customer Service Centre and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. The forms are also available at the back of the chamber during meetings. In dealing with development applications, councillors need to take into account specific planning matters contained in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. Accordingly, the provisions of section 4.151 of that Act are set out in the Council Officer's report detailing planning issues to be considered. The Local Government Act 1993, section 375A, requires that a division be called whenever a motion for a planning decision is put at a meeting of the council. Planning decision means a decision made in the exercise of a function of council under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979, including a decision relating to a development application, an environmental planning instrument, a development control plan, or a development contribution plan under that Act, but not including the making of an order under Division 9.3 of Part 9 of that Act. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Squire. Apologies, we're all here and accounted for, and we have Councillor Glacken on Zoom. We also have our youth mayor and another councillor here this evening. Welcome to our proceedings. We have an item later in the agenda to discuss. Merrill minute, there are no Merrill minutes. Action plans, thanks councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the following action plans be received and noted. 1, actions complete for noting only. 2, actions awaiting response from external parties. 3, actions in progress. And 4, long-term issues more than 3 months.
Thank you. Seconder, thanks. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that?
No, but I do have a question.
Yep.
It's relating to, there was some discussion in one of the action plans about, I think it was long-term action plans, tabletop road community space and discussions occurring with CSU and TAFE. My question is, have we had any further discussions with the Department of Education re schools in that area?
Mr. Christie.
Thank you for the question, and for you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, we are in ongoing discussions with the Department of Education in regards to the actual Education Precinct Master Plan, which is the item Councillor Furley is referring to. They are a member of the wider working group, but outside of that working group, which at the moment is working through some issues with CSU and TAFE as the landowners, we're also having ongoing discussions with the Department of Education about the need, and we believe urgent need, for planning for a school in Faguna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Christie. Councillor King, question?
I have a question regarding DPAN and the explanation that it's been affected by COVID. Is there any further update on where we are at the liquidation processes to the relevant member of staff?
Mr Finlayson.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question. No further update, unfortunately, other than what's provided in the council meeting papers. The matter is still with the liquidator, who is seeking assistance from ASIC to progress potentially invalid transactions occurring at the time of the wind up of DPAN. And there have been some delays through ASIC, as I understand it, regarding COVID and the work that ASIC's required. So unfortunately, it has been delayed.
Just to follow up if I can. So that information that you last received from the liquidator, when was that?
The last updates I received after making inquiries was in the month of August. And since then, in terms of making further inquiries, the liquidator advised that they'll be informing all creditors at the same time in future through their standard communication mechanisms.
Just one further. Did they give you any ballpark time frame when that may be?
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question. Unfortunately, it's a bit like ourselves. It's outside of our control, and it's a little bit outside their control as to when ASIC will actually progress the matter. I don't believe ASIC has provided a liquidator a set date of when they will be able to attend to the additional matters required.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Confirmation minutes of the previous meeting held on 11th of October 2021. Thank you, Councillor Vanderman.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I move that the minutes of the council meeting held on Monday, the 11th of October 2021 at 6, whatever it is, PM, 6:56, is it?
6:58.
6:58 PM be confirmed.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron.
I'd like to second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Do you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
No questions or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. There are no reports from community forums. Notices of motion or notice of rescission. 9.1 notice of motion. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that council staff prepare a report by March 2022, which explores the possibility of applying the principles of water-sensitive urban design in full or in part to future urban subdivisions in the Albury local government area.
Thank you. Councillor Con.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley. Do you wish to open debate? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There is no doubt that this council is doing a lot in the sustainability space, but one of the issues that constantly faces us is large subdivisions, small blocks, the issues of urban trees, heat, and so on. And water-sensitive urban design is a program that's been running for quite some time now. In fact, I think this council even considered carrying out a subdivision back in about 2013-14, that it didn't come to pass. Water-sensitive urban design is simply a way of diverting stormwater for productive use where it falls, rather than rushing down drains and emptying out into the river. From that, we can get reduced stormwater flows, which often can cause erosion problems. We increase the local soil moisture. If we've got trees planted in nature strip, the water can be diverted to water them. A couple of other issues that can be used under water-sensitive urban design are porous pavements and road surfaces, so the water actually goes through the pavement and the road surface. And that sounds a bit strange, but it has happened in a number of councils. They use a different road making technique using a lot of rubber. And the other thing, of course, it will do, it reduces the use of high quality drinking water to irrigate green spaces. We've spent a lot of money making this water to water gardens. So I'm simply asking for a report. I may not be here to receive the report, but it may provide an opportunity for the new council to get started on sustainability.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further debate or questions? No? Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, 9.2, notice of motion moving to award-based system for elections and representation, Albury City LGA. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council considers and subsequently determines if there is support for moving to a ward-based system for elections and representations in Albury City local government area.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron. Do you wish to speak? Open debate. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The Local Government Act makes it clear that one of the responsibilities of councillors is to be accountable to the ratepayers and the citizens of the local government area for decisions and actions of council. And that's without limitation in the Act. I believe that wards provide a superior mechanism for doing that and for the ratepayers to be able to hold councillors accountable for decisions of council. Very often with a incorporated area without wards, the reference to issues that affect particular geographical and segments of the city are diluted somewhat because a councillor is of course elected across the whole population. It also provides, in my view, a superior mechanism for councillors to develop and maintain a close watch and a close relationship, if necessary, in who is actually representing them on council. So wards have been a great success in many areas of the state. Some of the largest cities in New South Wales, in fact, the largest city outside of Sydney, Wollongong and Newcastle, which is Canterbury Bankstown, in fact, uses the ward system very successfully. I won't go into the mechanics of it. Perhaps I'll do that later when it's if I hear any fatuous arguments against it. But all in all, we have a situation in Albury, I think, where we don't get a real lot of community engagement and a very strong response. We've discussed this earlier in the year about the lack of strong response to our community engagement. And at the end of the day, the Act provides that we're responsible to our ratepayers and we must be accountable to our ratepayers. And this provides a direct mechanism for that. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a speaker against Councillor Glack, and I believe she's going in via phone, and we'll put her on the microphone because her Zoom mic is not working.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to speak against this motion. I don't support a ward system, and I think in contrast to the comments by the mover for this motion, our system in Albury, an holistic and inclusive system of no wards, has worked very well and has been very successful. I believe that our community engagement is very positive, and I believe that not having a ward system allows all of our community to work together, and just as it allows the councillors to work together as well. My belief, and I've spent about as much time in local government as the speaker for, the mover for the motion, and I believe that a ward system actually divides the community. We need to ensure that the best candidates possible apply, nominate to be councillors, and that our community elects the best candidates to be the councillors to represent them. I don't think that we are served well by having wards, because I believe that the ward system means that 3 or so councillors from each of the wards are working towards their own ward as opposed to necessarily the entire council. I believe also that residents have a better opportunity to make representation to individual councillors if they are being represented by all 9 councillors. They then get to select which councillor they would like to speak to if they wish to raise a concern. I also am conscious of the fact that on occasion councillors will move their place of residence, and I'm conscious that there are a number of councillors on our current council who have moved their residence during the time on which they have been, or during the time in which they have been a councillor on this council. Those councillors would need to change their ward ready for the next election if they were to remain on council. And there are a number of councillors who have changed their place of residence over a number of terms that they have served on Albury City Council. So I don't agree with Councillor Cameron, and I believe that Albury has the better of the systems. We are a city that has a number of suburbs. Not all suburbs would be able to have a ward. Our footprint is not enormous, and we have, I believe, a centric area that is reasonably well populated, and therefore one group of councillors can represent that whole council. And so I cannot support this suggestion from Councillor Cameron. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Question before I have a speaker for. Question, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the most appropriate member of staff. Could staff confirm that the Act and its regulations do not require a councillor to live in the ward that they represent under a ward system any more than a councillor is required to physically reside in the city that they represent under the current unincorporated system, provided that they hold rateable property in the city?
Ms. Squire.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could, I'll just check those details while the council continues its debate, because I don't have that information at hand, but I'll have a look for you right now.
Well, I would suggest that you'll find what I've asked is the affirmative.
Thank you. I'm sure it is, Mr. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Vandermeer, have you got a question as well as speaking against, or is it? Oh, okay. You're next to you lights up all the time. Councillor Stuttery speaking for.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the first thing to say about this is that Councillor Cameron is really seeking some information and some support. He's not demanding that a ward system be brought in forthwith at the conclusion of this debate, and I think that it's worth pursuing. One of the reasons why I would support a ward-based system is that Albury City, unlike say an inner Sydney suburb, is somewhat heterogeneous. We've got small flat apartments, we've got small houses, we've got big houses, we've got rural properties, we've even got broadacre lifestyle properties, Mr. Mayor. And so I think that, and we also have some agriculture. We have a bit of light industry, we have some agriculture, and then we have a lot of other industries as well. And I think that by going to a ward-based system, one of the wards could potentially, for example, take in the agricultural or rural areas and provide a bit more input for those residents, as well as those who live in the suburbs. So overall, I don't much see anything wrong with at least exploring whether there is support for moving towards this. I think it's something that's worth looking into. Thanks very much.
Councillor Stuttery, I have a question from Councillor Glacken. Is that on the phone again, Mr. Atkinson?
Yeah, Alice. Neil.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Through you, Mr. Mayor, my question is to the staff. My understanding is that a ward-based system needs to have almost equivalent populations, and from memory it's something like 10% different is permissible. So I'm not quite sure, would that accommodate the provision for having an agricultural ward and then a city ward or an apartment, small apartment ward? Would that sort of concept work?
So is there a question there, councillor Glacken? Question?
You didn't hear the question?
No, just a statement.
No, my question is to the staff.
Yeah.
My understanding is that when we look at a ward-based system, the wards need to be roughly equivalent sizes. And so my understanding is that it possibly is 10%. Can they confirm that such that it would not be possible to have, for example, an agricultural system, or would it be possible to have an agricultural ward, a ward that looks after, as was described, the small apartments or words to that effect, and then the large houses? Is that what was suggested by the previous speaker?
Yes, thank you, Ms Squire. There's another tickly one.
Through you, Mr Mayor, based on certainly my reading of the provisions of the Act in regard to wards, there does need to be an equal distribution of population per capita within each ward. But as part of the process of determining what those ward boundaries might look like, you would consider where they were best positioned to achieve the per capita requirements, but also to achieve potentially a balanced blend. But that would be something that the council could work through in due course.
Thank you.
Okay, another question from councillor Doxey before we take a speaker against.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just following on from Ms Squire, in relation to wards, I did clarify, how do we divide up the LGA? How many wards would that leave us? And how many councillors per ward, given we've got 9 councillors?
Ms Squire.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the question, councillor Doxey. I think the process of determining what those wards would be is part of the whole engagement and consultation process that you undertake with the community. You know, whether that means that once you've done the analysis and the consultation that you end up with 3 wards or 4 wards, you understand that through the journey. And there is a lot of emphasis in the Act around the consultation that councils should do prior to going to a poll or seeking a referendum with regard to the creation of wards. But that's something you develop through the course of the conversation.
Thank you, Ms Squire. That's moving forward and not backward. Councillor Vandervan speaking against. Okay, I'll take councillor Vandervan after yourself.
Thank you. Sorry?
No, I had councillor Glack.
Councillor Glacken
1, 2,
spoke against.
yeah, it's your turn.
She spoke
against, and then councillor Suttree spoke for it. She asked the question.
Yeah, that's right. Councillor Vandervan speaking against, then councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Now that we've got the order set, it's 5 weeks and 5 days until the people of Albury give us a vote on how we've done the job. Those people that are standing again, give us a vote on how we've done this job over the last 5 years, and it'd be pretty close to 3 months. And I'm happy to be judged by the whole city of Albury as to the job that I've done. I've noticed with other councils that do have wards, and I think it works very well in Greater Hume Shire. We've got 3 major centres of population, and they're all pretty much the same in terms of the population that's in each of those 3 major centres. And I think that the wards work well in that environment. We've got 9 councillors here that are accountable to the whole of the community. And I think to have a situation where we create wards just provides too much in terms of opportunities to try and get for one section of the community something different to what another section of the community might need. I think to have a holistic approach to the city in its entirety is a much more effective governance model than a ward system would be. So I oppose any move towards a ward-based system. And I note with some interest that I'm not sure how many notices of motion Councillor Cameron has moved in the last 5 years and 2 months, but it is quite interesting to note that in about 5 weeks and 5 days, we do have an election. And maybe that's why this particular idea has been floated to provide a talking point and maybe some traction in the media in terms of councillors.
Yes, Councillor Cameron.
I really enjoy the contributions from Councillor Vanderven on most occasions, but he's now straying into conjecture about my motives, which are quite improper.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderven, have you
I'm just
finished the
making a
debate?
note, Mr. Mayor, about the fact that there's an election coming up.
Thank you. We'll just, have you finished?
Yeah,
Thank
no
you.
problem.
Speaker 4, Councillor Thurley.
A highly qualified speaker for, Mr. Mayor. The motion read simply says we consider and subsequently determine if there is support. That part I support. I would be totally opposed to wards in Albury. I don't see that they're necessary, and I don't see at the moment how they would work well for unity throughout the city. But the issue says if we want to have wards, we have to go through a constitutional referendum, which costs a significant amount of money. Given Councillor Cameron's motion, I'd be quite happy that in our have your say, we invite the community to have their say on whether they think wards are a good idea or not. So in that context, I support the motion, noting that I'm totally opposed to wards.
Thank you. Speaker against, Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I note that wards work well in some shires, and in particular rural shires that are made up of distinct and separate communities. But I think Albury really is one community. You've got people who might live in Saguna and work in Albury, or live in Albury who do sport in Lavington or North Albury, or who live in Lavington or North Albury and study up at CSU or TAFE in Saguna. I think it would be extremely difficult to only be able to contact your local councillor for your local ward when our lives are so intertwined and we all share in the whole community. We're right at the end of a term of council. This council has been here for 5 years. And not once has any resident of Albury ever contacted me to say that their biggest issue with local government was the absence of wards. It's really not something that I can see as a priority. And if I'm wrong, that can be reflected at the upcoming local government election, and the next council can make that decision if they think it's important. But I certainly can't. And I think coming to the end of this term of council, our legacy is the Two Cities, One Community partnership. The community wanted to see us work together for the whole community and recognise that we are one community. And I wouldn't want to seek to divide that. Thanks.
Thank you. Speaker 4, Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm 5149 for this this proposal. Again, I support Councillor Thurley's notion of what actually the motion says, and that is if there is support moving towards. It's not we're going to do it. The acting CEO has done a great job in answering some tough questions, but we haven't got the whole picture. And this is, I think, the spirit in which Councillor Cameron is actually asking that we explore, we look at, and then with all the information in hand, progress to the next stage. And look, my opinion on a ward-based system is that there's a lot of areas of Albury that I don't go to because I have no, I don't just aimlessly drive around, the back end of Thaguna or go over to Glenroy if I'm not doing business. That's not to say that I don't, care for those areas, but in support of the ward areas, if people live there, they drive past a park that hasn't been mown for a while. They'll see some graffiti that hasn't been picked up by our graffiti team, and if that's their patch, I'm sure they will advocate for those areas to be cleaned up and some infrastructure put in there. There's a fair amount of councillors that live in the CBD area, and there's not too many that live out at Taguna. So, that's a benefit of having it, but also in the same breath, we act on behalf of all ratepayers. And again, the model that we have now seems to be working okay, but I'm certainly up for exploring new things. And that's what the whole of Albury City Council should be looking at, is new and innovative ideas, to have a look at it. If it doesn't work, then, we move on to the next stage, but just accepting what we think is okay at the present time shows us a little bit of a narrow view. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Are there any further speakers or questions? Thanks. No, just to add, because everyone else has had their 5 cents worth, just to, before I go to Councillor Cameron, it's quite a perplexing motion, considers and subsequently determines if there is support for moving to ward-based system. Well, as my fellow councillor Con just said, I pushed and pushed for us to be more closely aligned with Wodonga as 2 cities, 1 community. Back in history in Albury, would tell you that Union Road was the boundary to Greater Hume or Hume Shire. And there was a Hume Shire office not far from this building, which then, if you saw or remembered Lavington in those days, Councillor Cameron, it was a bit of a Wild West town because nothing was done. The infrastructure was very poor. And essentially, I believe the ratepayers didn't really get their money's worth in Lavington. But as a result, when the council merged that land into Albury City, as we did with Taguna and other areas of the Hume Shire, there has been enormous progress, so much so that there's been enormous upside. And I think that was an example of how when you join and merge, things do work, and the resources you'd use would enable that to happen. In a ward-based system, I think you're creating divisiveness, and you're creating divisiveness in this chamber. I just don't think it'll work. I think, again, democracy says that we should all be able to stand for Albury City Council, not for Albury City wards and potholes. So I think, we need to consider what democracy allows us to do. Every person of the 50 or 1,000 or so in Albury are able to contact any one of these councils at this desk and on Zoom and ask them any question about anywhere in Albury, and they should respond. And I think that's the way it should remain. Councillor Cameron, do you wish to close debate? Thanks.
Yes, I've got a couple of words, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I'd like to thank my fellow councillors for their contributions. If I could start with the point raised by Councillor Glacken, who seems to feel that the current system works well and that there's no need to change it. And it said that in her experience, consultation is working well in the city. Well, myself and other councillors present saw some information earlier in the year which suggested that it's not working well. Councillor Glacken did make one comment that I'm puzzled by. She said not all suburbs would be able to have a ward. That just frankly is a bizarre thing to say, and it's completely not how the ward system works. The ward system requires that all population and all, therefore, all suburbs are divided into wards. So I really don't understand that. Councillor Vanderven, when he wasn't demonstrating some sort of proto-clairvoyance about my motives, seemed to feel that, we have a holistic, was the word that's been bandied around by more than just Councillor Vanderven tonight. There were moments when I felt like I was in Byron Bay or Tweed Heads or Nimbin, if I've heard the word holistic again. But in any case, he seemed to think that, awards would result in some sort of parochial behaviour. Well, the Act doesn't change when there's wards in its requirements for councillors to act in the best interests of the city and to consider all things on a holistic basis, to use the word that's so popular tonight. So once there's wards, and in places where there are wards like Canterbury Bankstown, councillors are not absolved from their responsibilities under the law to represent all the people in the city and to consider what is good for the whole city. Councillor Con seems to feel that we are one integrated community, that it's quite intertwined. Well, personally, I think that shows, it is my political and personal opinion, that demonstrates how out of touch Councillor Con and the Greens generally are with the lives of working people in Albury and Australia generally. To think that the experience is intertwined and we're all one and our experience is the same for everyone in the different parts of our city is outrageous. And you, Mr. Mayor, your contribution. I've heard you say some pretty interesting and, in my view, silly things in support of your fellow councillor, Councillor Con, over the journey.
Can I point of order you on that one?
No, you can't.
Okay.
But the when you attempt an infantile argument, and it is an infantile argument, and try and conflate the experience historically of two different cities and a shire and a city, Albury City and the Hume Shire, that really is plumbing the depths of what I've seen, some of the outrageous situations you've taken purely to support, I presume, your fellow councillor, as you said, Councillor Con. Why do we need wards? We need wards because the things that happen in the city affect people differently. And I'll give you a classic example and a very clear example. We fought hard, myself and some of the other councillors here in this last term of council, to defeat a proposal to build a $50 million chlorinated Palace of Versailles at the Lauren Jackson Centre, which incumbent and inherent in that plan was the requirement, because of the massive scale of that project and the massive cost and the massive running costs that would follow, that would have seen the destruction and the closure of the Lavington Pool and the Albury Swim Centre. Now, currently we have a ticket running, a group of people running, who are openly espousing that they want to resurrect that plan, zombie-like, from the grave. That would have the potential alone, I believe, given that we're already going to be in, for the first time in many, many years, in deficit due to COVID, that has the potential to put this city in extreme deficit and a reoccurring deficit. And the only way to deal with that will be future special rate variations. The people of North Albury and Lavington
Point of order,
have
Mr.
a
Mayor.
right to their facilities the same as everybody else in this city, despite it having a history of what our current mayor described as a Wild West or cowboy image. Consequently, wards provide a mechanism where those councillors who would support such a nonsense have to answer to the people who are most directly affected by it. Wards are a good system, they're a democratic system. They still provide for the legal guarantees and responsibilities that are in the Act now. And finally, I would like to particularly thank the contribution of Councillor Thurley tonight, who correctly observed what this motion is about. It's about discussing through the life of the next council whether there is support in our community for this or not. It's not about bringing it in tomorrow. It's a long-term process and it should be a gradual process. Thank you very much. I commend the motion to you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Spot on, 7 seconds left. Okay, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is lost. Thank you, councillors. CM10, presentations, deputations. There are none. CM11, reports, minutes of committees and working parties. There aren't any. CM12, documents for sealing. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council authorises the seal to be affixed to the document outlined below in the presence of two signatories authorised to fix the seal pursuant to Regulation 400 of the Local Government General Regulation 2005 and the council seal and management of legal documents and advice procedure. A, Albury Crown Lands Licence to Albury Auskick Centre Incorporated, Part Lot 701 DP 1023466 361 David Street, corner of David and Howell Street, commencing 1st of March 2022 to the 30th of August 2026, file 09/01767. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Blacken.
Huddle Street, sorry.
Yep. Councillor Blacken, you're on the line.
Happy to second, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that at all?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Officer reports for consideration. CM 13.1 development application 10.2020.37625.1 at 46 Tweed Court, the Guna multi-dwelling housing. Thank you, councillors. Kind of a move of thanks. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll get started. I move that council A receives and notes the contents of the report and B, refuses development application 10/2020 37625.1, proposing 3-lot Torrens freehold title subdivision and the construction of dwelling on each of the proposed allotments on lot 117 in DP 1/22202 at 46 Tweed Court, Laguna, for the following reasons. 1, the development is not consistent with the existing character as outlined in Part 10, Division B. I'll go this way. Objective D, or passive solar design and climate management as outlined in Objective 1 of Albury DCP 2010, and therefore is contrary to the provisions of Section 415(1)(a)(3) of the Environmental Planning Assessment Act 1979. 2, the development is not consistent with the design guidelines as outlined in Part 10, Division E, Clause 3C1, minimum primary street setback, Clause 3D1, character and Clause 3E1, sunlight access of Albury DCP 2010, and does not satisfy the associated performance criteria, and therefore is contrary to the provisions of Section 415(1)(a)(3) of the Environmental Planning Assessment Act 1979. 3, the development will have an unacceptable impact on the locality in terms of impact to establish built environment of the locality, and therefore is contrary to the provisions of Section 415(1)(b) of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. The site, owing to its location, orientation, and topography, is not suited to the development, and therefore is contrary to the provisions of Section 415(1)(c) of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. And 5, or Part 5, the development is contrary to the provisions of Section 415(1)(d) of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, as it will have an unacceptable impact on the amenity of the adjoining property owners in the locality.
Thank you, Councillor Glagan.
Happy to second and at an appropriate time if I can speak. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. I have a question from Councillor Cameron. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to take the question first? Councillor Cameron, question.
Most appropriate member of staff. When the proponent was speaking, addressing council earlier in question time, the point was made that they could build a single large building, large dwelling, presumably, and even elevated in the fashion that was demonstrated by the pictures of an adjacent building, which was presumably built with council approval. Can I get some guidance from the staff on whether that is the fact, and why, if we reject this application, the proponents may not simply choose to build a large elevated or more relatively elevated dwelling?
Mr. Christie.
Thank you for the question. And for you, Mr. Mayor, and obviously I won't purport to speak on behalf of anyone else or what they may achieve or decide to do. But in regards to the couple of points of your question, one of them, obviously what's before us is the application for a 3-lot subdivision and 3 dwellings. So we don't have a single dwelling or anything else, and it may come in many shapes or forms, as can be seen by the housing in the locality. So it would be hard for me to speculate on exactly what it would be, but we'll take into account the considerations that we currently do. Through the officer's report, it's been fairly clear. A lot of our concerns in relation to the amenity impacts are on the future residents of the development itself. The concerns around overshadowing are clear around the development itself. There is some aspects of adjoining development where you do take that into account, such as where there are topographical differences between developments. Then you do look at whether any variances to the DCP or any design elements are contributing to that. So it all come into what we'd consider for a particular application at a point in time, and I couldn't speculate as to what it would be in its entirety. I was informed earlier that the development that was referenced in the photos was actually a compliant development application for the one adjoining, and therefore did not go for the normal assessment processes and satisfied the state government rules.
Could I just ask a small follow-up by way of being more specific? Yeah, I think you've started to touch on this point, and I appreciate that as professional staff, you can't speculate on what might or might not be put before council, and you and we are required to deal with applications as they arise. But in any case, I guess what is troubling to me is the concept that would it theoretically be possible for a development to be put in place in the existing block that's in question, which would be a complying development and still provide for a larger dwelling, which may be more elevated?
Thank you for the question, and for you, Mr. Mayor. There are a variety of developments that can occur from compliant development. The major thing would be around setback to the adjoining development, to the side boundaries.
Yep.
And in compliant development, actually doesn't consider impact upon adjoining properties. No, it considers a variety of options, which are what are your own internal setbacks and what are your own internal impacts. So in short, yes, there might be able to be a development application that came in that could have had greater impact. Conversely, there might be a development application that comes in that has lesser impact or minimal impact upon the adjoining development.
Thank you.
Councillor Doxey, question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I direct my question to Mr. Christie. The first presenter showed a slide that indicated the estate, reasonably large blocks, except for these three that have been subdivided. The second speaker then said subsequently there had been a number of other blocks being subdivided similar to that. Which is the fact?
Thank you for the question. And then for you, Mr. Mayor, and again, not wanting to suppose or talk on behalf of others, the way I interpreted what they were saying is that the second speaker, Ms. Packer, raised concerns that you get a different view of the development if you look at it from on the ground rather than from an aerial view where the lot sizes may exaggerate any differences. But on the ground, she was concerned that those differences weren't as obvious, regardless of the various lot sizes. The photo that we've provided in figure 4, which is an aerial photo of the locality, is the subdivisions as through our cadastral information, which is generally accurate to within a few weeks. It can sometimes take a few weeks to get the information from Land and Registry Services in New South Wales, but the yellow lines on that photo in figure 4, which I believe is on page 52 of your agenda, indicates the subdivision layout as currently played out on site. But there is a difference between an aerial photo and what you may see when you drive around.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Christie, just to follow up on Councillor Cameron's question in relation to the complying development at the rear of this existing block and the Timmerman's home, your view, does it comply?
Thank you for the question for you, Mr. Mayor. I wouldn't be able to provide that advice now. You'd have to, there are over 70 or 80 various elements of compliant development. They relate to setbacks, they relate to heights, they relate to the design of the dwelling, where front doors are, how big windows can be. To say coherently or consistently that it is 100% compliant development, I wouldn't be able to do that without being a full assessment. But was brought to my attention that a compliant development certificate for a dwelling had been provided for that site, and based on the assumption that it did comply with all those requirements.
So again, back to the point about a bigger home, if a bigger home was built on the corner and it was 60 or 70 squares on that particular site, that would take up 2 of those allotments, which would be the areas that we're talking about that would majorly overshadow the adjoining property. Would that not be the case?
I think, again, without seeing it in front of it, you wouldn't 100% guarantee, but there is potential for greater impact. There's also potential to design a dwelling where there was potentially less impact.
Okay.
I'll be brief, Mr. Mayor. When I saw there was a public forum tonight and I'd read the attachments, there were 206 pages of submissions about this development. So it wasn't just one owner. There was a lot of stuff in the submissions which brought up most of the issues we've heard tonight. And in my opinion, I'm not an expert planner, but I believe that the staff have written an appropriate report regarding this development.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, there are no speakers against. You're speaking for.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I do apologise. I get a bit of feedback in my headphone when I'm using the telephone, so I do apologise. If I can speak for, I would like to.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. So firstly, I'd like to make note of the fact that we had the community forum earlier this evening, and we did have someone speaking for and someone speaking against, noting that the speaker for was in fact the applicant. And I am conscious of the fact that they have taken considerable or gone to considerable effort to meet or better meet the requests of people living in that proximity. Other councillors will be aware that I often say that someone who owns their land have certain rights, and really I can understand that they want to do what they want to do with their land, but just as they have their rights, so do the neighbours. And so I noted that considerable effort has been made by the proponent, including the stepping of the blocks or the developments within the 3 blocks, the provision of 3 dwellings, gone from 1 dwelling with a subdivision of 3 to providing the concept of the 3 dwellings. And they made reference to the frontage along Tweed Court, as opposed to what is otherwise a lot of fencing. They've also brought down the roof line to be a minimal imposition to the neighbours, and I have no doubt that the neighbours appreciate that, and other people in that locality do appreciate that. However, there are considerable reasons, as moved by Councillor Thurley, as to why this development would not perhaps be allowed, should we as councillors agree with this motion as we have before us this evening. In essence, there are a number of the reasons are the setbacks, not only from Tweed Court, but also from the neighbours for each of those 3 developments, the lot sizes, and therefore the number of dwellings. I am conscious of the question asked by, or a couple of questions asked by the councillors this evening. One was, would the developer, the person who spoke against, would that person be happy if 2 houses were built rather than the 3 houses? And I was interested in hearing Councillor Cameron's question about would it be possible to build 1 large house? Would that still not create the issues that the neighbours and the people in that locality are raising issues with? In essence, if there was 1 building or 1 house to be built on that large, as is now 1 block, then it would need to meet the requirements, including not overly overshadowing. It would need to meet the requirements of setback, etc. And I do note in the report, although the report's gone from my iPad at the moment, that orientation could be improved if there was 1 or 2 developments as opposed to what is suggested at the moment, the 3 developments. So on that basis, I cannot support tonight a development that would consist of 3 dwellings or a subdivision of 1 lot, large lot, as was originally conceived by the original subdivision, into 3. And I would, however, think that it would be possible to redevelop a concept into either 1 or 2 lots, but of course it would still need to meet the requirements, as example, setbacks and overshadowing. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gluckin. Question, Councillor Vanderman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. To the most relevant member of staff through you. From pages 50 to 58, submissions are dealt with, and each of the issues around the submissions were dealt with by planning comment. Is that planning comment made by our staff or a contracted staff?
Mr. Christie.
Thank you for the question, and for you, Mr. Mayor, that they're from our staff. If it was a quote or that attributed to a third party, the council, we would either have it in italics or attribute that quote. Okay. But that's planning comment on in relation to the issue.
So on that basis, Mr. Mayor, can I speak against the current motion? Okay, so I've had a close look at all of the issues raised in the submissions, and the information from my reading of the responses to each of those issues has been that there is some support for a couple of the submissions raised by the submitters, but in the majority, the submissions have been considered to be either irrelevant or not supported by staff. So to have a situation where we've all of a sudden, after a length of time here, which is quite considerable over, I think it's probably at least nearly 2 years for this particular development to come to this stage before us. The issue for me is that we all of a sudden got 5 reasons why we don't, we shouldn't support this development. But in the body of the report where the planning comments are made, I can see only 2 clear issues in terms of where the council staff support the concerns of the submitters. So on the basis of that, I am inclined to not support the staff recommendation. And if this motion is lost, I would be foreshadowing a different motion. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Are there any further speakers against or questions, councillors? Councillor Cameron speaking against. No speakers for.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is one of the hard decisions that councillors are required to make, which we all experience along the way from time on council occasionally, where it's impossible to please both parties. And likewise, while I am happy to disagree with the recommendations from staff in planning matters, it's something that I think a councillor should do with extreme caution, because we have experts and who work very hard and provide us with expert advice. But in this occasion, I can't see that the solution will not be, or the problem here will not be worse than what will emerge shortly if the development is refused. It would seem to me, and I think after the time I've been on council, I have a reasonable apprehension of how these planning matters work, that the developers will, in all likelihood, come back with a larger proposal, which it will be very difficult, which must be dealt with on its merits. And it will be difficult, having satisfied the setbacks, to for the council of the day, which I may or may not be part of, to refuse. It's very much a case of be careful what you wish for, because if this development is refused, the next application may well be even less to the taste of the neighbours I'm worried about. That's what concerns me. And it's not a, can I say, I had no preconceived position. I was still wrestling with it when I came here tonight, and I'm still wrestling with it to a degree now. But it seems to me, particularly in light of the analysis by Councillor Vanderman, which I agree with, that it may well be, the application may be less of a problem for the neighbours than what may ultimately emerge if we refuse it. But that is the decision I've come to tonight, but reluctantly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. No further questions or speakers. I'd just like to finish up by also speaking against this recommendation, just on the basis that, as has been indicated by Councillor Cameron and Councillor Vanderman, be careful what you wish for, because it's a corner block. Any size home, single home, could be built on that corner block, including a double-storey home, which would overshadow the next door neighbour more than a single-storey home. It's the nature of the topography of that particular site. Aluka Views is a very, very hilly site, and you're not going to get or keep everyone happy. And when I asked the question before, and I asked it previously last year, 18 months ago, about the site cut for the home next door, it was consistent with southern side is at ground level and the northern side is dug down, would appear to be about 1.5 metres. So you're always going to have problems with shadowing. And to me, that's the block you buy, and that's what's going to happen. And having had some experience with houses overshadowing double-storey homes, even double-storey homes overshadow double-storey homes because of the topography of the ground. In terms of the issues about traffic, I don't believe the traffic is a major issue. In terms of the issues of sight lines at the corner, I don't think anything's improved or disproved on that note. And more importantly, right now we're going through a bit of a housing crisis. And would it appear that this particular development is about providing rental accommodation in our very, very desperate marketplace. And again, as councillors, it's a bit each way, this planning proposition in terms of this site and in terms of this application. And having seen what happened behind this house with the one that was a complying development, I'm a little bit worried about the consistency of planning in that precinct of Luca Views, given the amount of fences, the amount of amenity that's been destroyed because of the fences along the roadway. And then I see that house perched up on the hill above these two sites, and it's about two metres higher than them. And it is all fill. I just wonder how the hell that got approved. And I know that's not our problem, but it is something that is seen by our community as an inconsistent application of the planning controls. So I won't be supporting this recommendation. Happy to put the motion now. Do you want to tidy up, Councillor Thurley?
The issue of what might be built there if we refuse this application is irrelevant to this decision tonight. Any proposal to build something on that block will once again come back to planning principles and will be presented to us. And the issues of overshadowing, privacy and so on will have to be gone through again. We can speculate whether they build a 60 square house that's 2 stories high. It has to meet our planning controls no matter what. So what we might imagine or speculate is irrelevant to the decision to be made tonight.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion as a division. All those in favour? Councillor Doxey, Councillor Cameron, Councillor Con, Councillor Thurley and Councillor Clacken. All those against? Councillor Stutch, Councillor King, Councillor Mack and Councillor Vanderman. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Okay, CM 13.2 Albury Development Control Plan Draft, Part 5 Vegetation Protection. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Council A endorses the draft amendment to Part 5 Vegetation Protection of the Albury Development Control Plan 2010 for public exhibition purposes, with the removal of Control 5.2 Part 4E for public exhibition purposes, and B places the draft amendment and any supporting material on public exhibition for a minimum of 28 days in accordance with the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979 and the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act Regulation 2000.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Con, would you like to open debate?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'll obviously speak to Control 5.2 Part 4E, which is an amendment to the recommendation. But before doing so, I wanted to speak to the rest of the draft, which I'm not seeking to amend. I think the staff have done some really important work in preparing this, and it goes a long way to addressing some issues that have recurred during this term of council. We've had a number of significant greenfield developments where changes have been made at the last minute through conditions of consent, which is an inefficient, inelegant process. It gives no certainty to current residents, future residents, or to developers. So actually addressing this in a strategic, future-focused way is to be commended. And I do support the vast majority of this document. I have added an amendment to the recommendation in the agenda tonight, which is the removal of Control 5.2 Part 4E, which was raised at the Sustainability Advisory Committee meeting as a concern, but it hasn't been changed or incorporated by the planning staff in the current draft. The clause that I'd like to remove is one that would provide an exemption to the control plan so that no permit would be required for any vegetation removal within 3 metres of a dwelling. If the draft policy is adopted as I've amended it, plenty of vegetation can still be removed on residential properties through the other exemptions that already exist for small or insignificant vegetation, for a quite enormous list of various introduced species, etc. But I do believe that removing a large native tree should require a permit, which of course our staff would grant in the case of impending structural damage, which was the reason given for this clause. So I do think that that should be granted, but that a permit should be required. in my experience as a state emergency service volunteer, I have been called upon to conduct emergency tree removal in the middle of the night in emergency circumstances. I'm not aware of council ever being a barrier to tree removal in those circumstances, and that would continue to be the case under the new policy as I've amended it as well. In any case, whatever decision we make tonight is going to go out for public consultation for the next 28 days, so the community can let us know.
Thank you. No speakers against, but no questions. Speaker for, Councillor Thurley. Hang on, we've got a speaker against now. Councillor Cameron, I'll take you up to Councillor Cameron, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Cameron.
Yes, due to the amendment to the original recommendation, I can't support this and won't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley speaking for.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this new draft amendment to Part 5 is an excellent piece of work by our staff. We've finally included things like native vegetation, not just trees. Once upon a time, it just said trees. And I do agree with this amendment because without it, a tree could be removed without permit. And I just believe that if someone wants to remove a significant tree, then we either get an arborist or a building surveyor to have a look and give the tick. It shouldn't be up to the landowner simply to decide, I don't like that tree and I'm going to get rid of it and I don't need a permit. So this is just a little safety measure. I think it's a worthwhile one and I support this amendment. And in any case, as Councillor Connor said, it now goes out on public display so we can hear back what people say.
Thank you. There are no questions or further debate. Happy to close debate, Councillor Con.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion as a division. All those in favour? Councillor Stutchby, Councillor Doxey, Councillor King, Councillor Murray, Councillor Con, Councillor Thurley, Councillor Vanderman and Councillor Glacken. Those against? Councillor Cameron. The motion is carried. Okay, 13.3, which is the Brooklyn Fields Trunk Sewer Stage 3 to Woolshed Creek. Councillor Vanderman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I might need a bit of water first, but I'll start and move the recommendation as a motion. The council accepts the tender from Longford Civil Proprietary Limited for contract number 20/02694 Brooklyn Field Sewer Stage 3 to Woolshed Creek. My apologies. And Lipset Gravity Main for the lump sum amount of $2,437,886, including GST.
Councillor Glacken. Happy to second. Okay, thank you. Councillor Vanderman, do you wish to open debate?
At this stage, no. Thank you.
Speaker for, Councillor Con, no speakers against.
Very briefly, thanks to the staff for providing the review of environmental factors as part of the public agenda document, and I enjoyed learning about micro-tunnelling.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, there are no further questions or debate. Do you wish to close debate?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You haven't been earning cashews again?
No.
Okay. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We have provision of cleaning services, Albury Airport and Administration Building Contract 21/02006. Councillor King.
Put forward the recommendation that the council accepts a tender from HACCP International Property Services Proprietary Limited for the schedule of rates contract number 02006 for cleaning services Albury Airport and Administration Building for a 3-year period commencing 12 January 2022 with a contract value of $503,600, including GST.
Councillor Glacken. Happy to move? Yep. Okay, Councillor King. I have a question from Councillor Cameron. Did you wish to open debate before that, or are you happy to take the question?
I'll take the question first.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the most appropriate member of staff. Does the tender, my question is in two parts. Does the tender from HACCP International Proprietary Services Limited articulate how many cleaning staff they'll be employing?
Mr. Millett.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm not aware of the exact number of staff, but through the tender process, they've identified that it's an appropriate amount to provide the service.
Well, what they think is appropriate or what we think is appropriate?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what we think is appropriate.
And what do we think is appropriate?
I don't have that answer, sorry.
The second part of my question is the bid seems fiscally competitive. You would agree, I suppose. How can council be assured that they will meet their industrial legal entitlements and responsibilities and pay at least the minimum award rate with overtime and penalty rates?
Mr. Mellett.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So within the contract, there's provisions within increases of the award. So that's within the contract documentation. So the award increases payments. Council's made ability for that to pass through to council. Contract payments, they provide statutory declarations that they have met their obligations under any awards, and the recommended contractor has been providing this service, and we've had no concerns about their payments of their staff.
And I say this in general terms with this final part of my question, Mr. Mayor, because I don't wish to be seen to be suggesting that there's anything wrong with this contractor. I don't have knowledge of that, and I'm not suggesting that. But in general terms, what is the consequence if we subsequently find out that they haven't been complying with the statutory declarations that contractors generally in these situations provide us with? Is that a breach of their contract with us?
Mr. Mellett.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that would be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor King, you moved it. You're speaking to it. Thank you.
Yeah, look, a very, very important contract, the cleaning of the airport and the building that we sit in. Initially on the 6th of September, I sent a notice of motion to the CEO asking that this tender be withdrawn. I downloaded the tender and there was no reference in any of the documents in relation to COVID-19 cleaning protocol. There was nothing mentioned about PPE. There was nothing mentioned about anything to do with anything of this major pandemic. Also in my email to him, I referred to the fact that the contractor safety manual that all contractors have to supply with tenders had no mention of COVID-19 at all, and that there was no policy in place of bringing external people from outside the area, COVID testing or anything. I appreciate it's a very fluid type of situation, but I would have thought that the cleaning contract of a building which we sit would have had some mention of that. Now, consequently, from my email to the CEO, who said it was an operational matter, there was a extra addendum or things sent out to the all of the applicants, which is mentioned in the report, and that then seemed to highlight the concerns that I had, which post-tender clarification, which appear to have been somewhat addressed. But just in general with the contracts that council does moving forward, I think it must be incumbent upon them to detail COVID-19 responses, COVID-19 protocols, clearly laid out, spelt out to any contractor, no matter what it is, let alone cleaning of the airport and the council building, of what their obligations are, and certainly bringing people from out of town and adhering to the COVID testing rules. And look, just in general with the tender process, I mean, this is not great work. I think we should, the council executive should go back and look at the way that the tenders are presented. Now, any reasonable tenderer who looked at this but didn't put in a quote might have read it and said, well, there's nothing in there about COVID-19. There's nothing in there about cleaning of the airport. The only thing mentioned anything hazardous at the airport was pulling out syringes from the the public toilets, and they may have then not put in for this tender because of all the details not being there at the first round. So I'll probably implore the people who write these tenders to make sure that everything is in there that prospective tenderers can see, and ensure that we are ethical and straight up and down with people that want to do business with us.
Thank you, Councillor King. Any other speakers or questions? No. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. CM 13.5, provision of security patrol services contract 21/01030. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to move an amended motion here, and it would be along the lines of that council accepts the tender from Jeff Clark Security Proprietary Limited for the schedule of rates contract number 21/01030 for provision of security patrol services to Albury City for a 2-year period commencing 1 December 2021 for the contract value of $446,823.68, including GST.
Thank you. Councillor King.
I'd like to second that. Thank you.
Councillor Stutchbury, do you wish to open debate?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this I felt was an awkward kind of tender to deal with, because on the face of it, we have an existing supplier who quoted a lower tender price, and staff are asking us to, in fact, dismiss that supplier and accept security services from a different company for a higher rate. And so as a councillor reading this document, I've got to ask myself, well, why is this happening, and is it justifiable? Now, I'm not allowed to contact the tenderers to confirm or deny what's written in the report, and they're certainly not allowed to contact me. And if they did, then they would be removed from the possibility of gaining the tender. So I am relying 100% on what is written in the report by the staff. So I look at what they wrote about the current provider who gave us the lowest quote, and they said a couple of mildly negative things about him or that company. And then I read what they wrote about the more expensive and staff accepted tenderer, and they said some nice positive things about them. And realistically, when I was about halfway through this report, I promise you I didn't look at the end of it first. When I was about halfway through this report, I got the feeling that staff were going to not recommend the cheaper quote. And in fact, that turned out to be the case. So was there enough information for me in this report to make a decision that the current provider, despite giving the lower quote, should be removed and we get a new provider? And there wasn't. There was not enough solid factual information in this report that would make me want to vote for the more expensive tender. So therefore, that is why I'm moving the amendment that we keep the current provider who gave the lower quote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Any questions or further debate? Councillor Glacken speaking against. Yeah, we've got a phone call to Councillor Glacken. I'll take a speaker against first and foremost, Councillor Vanderman, then. He's also speaking against.
My voice last, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
I'm absolutely gobsmacked by this particular motion by Councillor Stutchbury, seconded by Councillor King. Yep. If we go back through the last 5 years and 3 months of this term of council, there have been so many instances where they have totally ignored the staff recommendations in terms of contracts has cost us hundreds and thousands of dollars. And to have a situation now
where he cites that there's not enough evidence to support the recommendation of staff is absolutely it is absolutely mind-boggling. There is plenty of evidence in my view, in terms of the number of pages that in fact, it goes from nearly the top of page 96 to halfway, a third of the way through page 97, in terms of what the staff have identified as the Backup Security Proprietary Limited CV. And just as well, Jeff Clark Security also has a good CV in terms of this particular report. But in terms of what the extra stuff that Backup Security is offering with the UniGuard X software for monitoring and reporting, that obviously has an enormous impact on the staff recommendation. And should this motion be defeated, Mr. Mayor, I will be, I'll foreshadow an alternative motion. I just am absolutely gobsmacked the reasons that have been given for not going with the tender for Backup Security. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Good to see you found your voice. Question from Councillor King, and then speaker against. There are no speakers for. Councillor Glackens. Question, Councillor King?
Just a relevant member of staff. Councillor Vanderman made a reference to what did you call it? Councillor. Okay. Made reference to UniGuard or something like that, I think it was. Was there a requirement in the tender to have some sort of system like UniGuard or whatever Councillor Vanderman called it as a requirement?
Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the question. No necessary requirement for it, but just having systems in place that make sure that we have an efficient and productive response to our security needs.
Thank you.
So just a question from me before we take Councillor Glacken. In relation to the Albury City's requirement to need to contract manage this other business, Jeff Clark Security, what were the issues where we had to manage the contract? Was that expectation, KPIs, times, facilities? What was the issue?
Thank you for the question, and back to you, Mr. Mayor. As outlined in the report, sort of the primary issues that we had in the last 12 months was in relation to response times to duress calls and staffing issues within it. So providing the sufficient amount of staff to provide the needs that we want within the contract.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Glacken, you wish to speak against?
Thank you. So to speak against, I agree with Councillor Vanderman, and had I been able to speak first, I would have been foreshadowing a similar motion. In essence, I believe there is sufficient information in the report, in fact, significant information in the report to indicate why it is that the staff have made the recommendation that they have, and note that there is a minor difference in cost, but significant reasons as to why the staff are suggesting the alternative. Sorry, I'll just get the right page. Backup security. Part of it is, as highlighted, computer or electronic software, which was indicated in the one of the areas of concern with Jeff Clark Security is a lack of computer utilisation, and there's another component here about the inability of them to be able to meet standards and the increased work, contract management being required by Albury City Council in the recent period. So I do not agree with this recommendation or this motion being put forward by Councillors Stutchbury and King, and cannot support it this evening. The report is very clear and provides more than ample information for us to be able to make the decision to confirm the recommendation of the staff. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Speaker for Councillor King, and then Councillor Cameron.
Thank you. I'm speaking for the motion, and I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Stusbury's assessment of this. I know neither of these organisations. However, I do note that Jeff Clark Security has been a long-term client of the council, and up until I think reading the report sort of in the last 18 months has been a very good operator. What I think we are overlooking is the, I think it was 4-month roadblock going one way, 3 months going the other way, the inability of every single business and every single organisation in the Albury-Wodonga area over the last 18 months to provide resources to do their business. Cafes, pubs, security businesses, Albury City Council planning, Albury City Council this, Albury City Council that. All I seem to read going through my emails for the last 8 months, and I was up to about 50, was reasons were resourcing and were I wouldn't say excuses, but reasons why the council couldn't do its business. And here we are slating this guy and marking him down in the last 12 months because he couldn't respond in a time because of, I presume, roadblocks or can't get staff, or those staff are doing other things. And like a lot of other things that we do, we go and get someone else on the panel, or we go and get someone else who's just as equipped at it. This is what the report says. We had to get other people to fill in the void, which I would think would be quite reasonable for this unavoidable situation. And then the report doesn't say what these extra requirements were. Were they standing at a COVID clinic? Were they providing security at council buildings or council assets because of COVID? Because no one could foresee that. I know I've mentioned COVID a lot of times, but certainly in the last 18 months, council's mentioned COVID a lot of times. So I think for this guy to be marked down because he couldn't respond in the last 12 months or couldn't find staff, and then to give him the bullet, I think it's a pretty poor form on the council's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Any speakers against? Doesn't look like it. I have another speaker for, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the second time tonight I've had to make a decision with which I've wrestled with. The report, is a good report. There's nothing functionally wrong with the report. It's professionally prepared and given, but there is something I think in what Councillor King says. And if I may have the indulgence of council to read one paragraph from the report, or part of one paragraph. Jeff Clark Security Proprietary Limited, the incumbent providers to this contract, and have delivered these services to Albury since 2013. So that's 8 years. Historically, they've provided good service to Albury overall, maintaining a good cooperative relationship between key stakeholders and adequate response times and reporting. More recently, in the past 12 months, etc. And as has already been articulated by others in this debate, there's perceived, and I've no doubt, a real problem in the last 12 months. Given that they have provided good service since 2013, and it's only in the last 12 months, which Councillor King, as I articulated, has raised the nature of the last 12 months in our community and country generally, I'm reluctant to move away from the other fact that, or not be persuaded by the other fact that they are in fact in a quantitative sense that by far 100% they're rated as the best financial proposition. I make the point too that there is a third tenderer who is only rated in a qualitative sense at 63% or 63 out of 100. And that the difference therefore in the qualitative between the incumbent and the recommended contractor is not that great when we consider the third horse in the race. So relatively in this case, given their 7 years out of the 8 of good service, I'm inclined narrowly to support this motion.
Thank you. I have a speaker against, Councillor Con.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I've given this a fair bit of thought, and I think I would have supported this motion based on the report and based on the arguments of the other councillors alone. Based on the report, their recommendation was spending $30,000 extra for, additional software, potentially faster responses, and that didn't seem worth the expenditure in the context of what I'd pictured in my head being, call outs to see whether an alarm going off was a possum or a threat to property. But I think given the response by staff tonight that one of the issues was a delayed or an inadequate response to a staff duress call, this is now about the health and safety of our staff. And I think that's something worth spending extra money on.
Thank you. There is no further questions or debate. Councillor Stutchby, would you like to close debate?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is lost. Councillor Vanderman, you foreshadowed your motion. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll move the staff recommendations. The motion the council accepts the tender from Backup Security Proprietary Limited for the schedule of rates contract number 21/01030 for provision of security patrol services to Albury City for a 2-year period commencing 1 December 2021 with a contract value of $474,090.76, including GST.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, do you wish to speak to that?
I reserve right of reply, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchby speaking against.
Mr. Mayor, I'm gobsmacked that Councillor Van der Ven is going to suggest we pay more for the service. That I'm shocked. I feel like I'm having an out-of-body experience.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further questions or debate? Did you wish to close debate on the gobsmack response?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Well done. Thank you. We'll move on to the next one. 13.6, the draft climate change adaptation strategy. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Council A receives and notes the report on Council's action relating to climate change mitigation and adaptation and legal and financial risks, and B endorses the Albury City climate change adaptation strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Con.
Happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, just to speak to that.
Fantastic report, which does outline some of the great achievements this council has made. I'll mention a few just so that they're out there in the public arena. Solar access, solar 450 kilowatts across 17 council facilities, designed to cater for their daytime power consumption, which is a very sensible way to do things. A community energy fund, which has funded 183 kilowatts of solar. Our LED lighting, which has saved quite a lot of power, and we moved in very quickly to get our street lighting to that. Hard waste, 52% reduction on 2010 levels. A little bit of a caution there. It's stalling the program, so it's bottoming out. We need another education campaign, in my opinion. Brilliant work on commercial food waste, with the Canberra-based company trialling the use of maggots and robots, which I think is a fantastic thing. There are a couple of other things that I would like to bring to the attention of staff, and they are that Blacktown, Parramatta and Campbelltown councils are using something called Cool Seal technology to seal their roads, and it reduces the road temperature by between 6 and 11 degrees. And given that one of the issues we constantly talk about in our suburbs is heat banks and urban heat, I think that this is something well worth exploring. I also chucked in one at the Sustainability Committee, which I think is worth a investigation. There are at least 4 councils in the state doing this. I'm talking about natural burials, and they replace cremation. And there are 4 New South Wales councils already doing it. I think it's well worthwhile having a look at. But I commend this report. It's a brilliant report by council.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. No speakers against. Councillor Glacken, did you wish to speak for? Yeah, we'll have to get you on the phone. Dial me up. Phone a friend on Millionaire, doesn't it?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Mayor, through you, to speak to support this report this evening, and indeed highlight one of the aspects, and that is a number of initiatives where we partner with business, either within our city of Albury or very much within our region. It offers a fantastic opportunity for future growth, and we've seen a number of initiatives come through with industry in partnership, but I'd like to highlight one, and that is on page 106, the middle of the bullet points down the bottom, soft plastic business recycling trial. We have a fantastic local business called Plastic Forests in our community, in our city, and partnering with businesses like this to progress the good work and achieve the waste reduction and the CO2 reduction is absolutely fantastic. And so I think we need to take heart from this and continue to work and form partnerships around our community and not only our city, but also in the region, to partner with other businesses and organisations to continue to do this good work, because it's not just about us and our residents within our community, it's about those other relationships that we can create. And I think this report highlights that most adequately. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. There are no further speakers for or questions. Just to finish up, I think again, the report, as requested by Councillor Thurley some meetings back, is a good reflection and actually a really good piece of, a really good document for younger people in the community to read and understand exactly what work this council has achieved over, I think even in the last 9 years, it's been quite significant. And there are councillors on this council now that did initially grant the 3-bin system, and that led to the start of the 50% reduction in waste. And I think the waste facility and the staff are doing a fantastic job. Andrea Baldwin and her team are working on towards getting better than 52%, Councillor Thurley. They're looking at other options available, and the light plastic trial is one of those. But I think, again, there's a lot of other things we could do, but there are certain constraints placed upon us by the EPA from a regional context. But recycling glass for road base, recycling tyres, there's a whole range of things we could do if there was enough money to do it. But I think, again, what we've done is quite significant, and this document does really lay it all out for everyone to see. So well done to the staff and certainly to the councillors who made the brave decisions to move that way in terms of the 3-bin system and the solar power, and also the lighting in the city. So thank you very much. So Councillor Thurley, do you wish to close debate?
I think.
Okay, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. We have the 13.7 Albury Gold Cup application for local half-day holiday stakeholder consultation. Councillor Vanderman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd move the recommendations motion. The council supports the half-day public holiday for the 2022 and 2023 Albury Gold Cup.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Very happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron has a question before we open debate. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the most applicable member of staff. During the public consultation process, it appears from the report that there were separate categories of offered, and that business, for example, was canvassed separately from the general population. Why was that so?
Mr. Glass.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Mayor. The survey enabled, at the start of the survey, there was a box where you could tick either are you a business or are you a general community member. Some opted to tick both boxes, some just chose to tick the box that was for businesses only, and they had a specific question that related to businesses.
But why? Why was that option offered?
Because we wanted to understand the impact on businesses. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, just open debate.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think the most telling paragraph in this particular report is the last one prior to the recommendation. I ask your indulgence if I read it out.
Yeah.
Council support for a half-day holiday has been a key factor in the success of the event and ongoing benefits to the community. Having regard to this and the overwhelming support for its continuation, it is recommended that council support the half-day public holiday for 2022 and 23. This would not only allow an application for a local public holiday to be lodged for a 2-year period, but also confirm council's commitment to the event as a major event on Albury's calendar. Now, understanding that by the time that the Albury Gold Cup is scheduled, I think in March 2022, that will be hopefully somewhere near our normality in terms of our outdoor life. I think that this would be a really signature event to showcase Albury and that how we've sort of gone in terms of their COVID situation and commencing a recovery from that. And I think it would be a great thing for us to have in terms of showcasing our community to the rest of the country. So I hope that council, my fellow councillors, see fit to support this. I think there was an overwhelming response and support for its continuation. And I think by any measure, the number of survey responses would really give us a great indication of what our community really thinks about this particular day. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Speaker against, Councillor King.
Look, I'm speaking against this. I have been approached over the last couple of years by businesses that don't go to the races, that have to continue doing their earthworks or their electrical contracting and have to pay their staff overtime wages because it's a public holiday. I looked at the statistics of the report. There's a lot of people that come out of town to Albury, so they're not coming from their city's public holiday. The question of hotels being full, well, people who live in Albury aren't going to go and stay at a hotel. It's the visitors that are going to do it. We don't have a combined Victorian public holiday, yet a lot of the visitors who come to the races are from Wodonga and outlying areas. So I'm just not sure that the economic benefit to the city outweighs the economic loss for businesses to close, for schools to close, for people who don't go to the races to then have to, if they are working, have to get childcare. And you know, I support 100% the Albury Race Club, but I think it's time that this public holiday, which was granted to actually stimulate the races, has done its job. And I think we're in modern times now that it shouldn't be approved. And I still think that a significant amount of people will go there, whether it's a public holiday or it's not.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron speaking for.
Well, Mr. Mayor, there are only two people in this chamber who were present when this was originally debated and was instituted by council, and that's myself and Ms. Jenny Howard, who is here with us.
Did she vote?
No, but she was always available to provide, as now, she was available to provide excellent support to the activities of council and councillors, as she continues to do now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Best leave the comedy to me. Right? But it was no laughing matter back in 1995. This proposal was resisted tooth and nail by the business community in Albury, and not just the earth moving contractors, of whom I have certain knowledge of their activities and attitudes to their workers, but by the Chamber of Commerce and its equivalent constituent bodies and predecessors in that day, and by the sorry, is another microphone on, Mr. Mayor? Is there some sort of snorting sound?
No, it's Councillor. I say it's Councillor Blacken's phone. It's feedback.
I'm taking off speaker.
Thank you. Now, where was I? Ah, yes. The intense resistance, not just from the business community, but from the conservative-minded councillors, and by that I mean those who dislike change, who sat on council at that time. And I remember very vividly that it was through the vote of Gary Purtell, and whatever people might like or not like about Gary, I personally find him a fine person, but it was his vote as a councillor, and he was a very good deputy mayor and councillor. I can tell everybody here in his time on council. It was his vote that secured this public holiday that the Albury community, Albury working people, and I believe the economy of Albury has benefited from ever since. There will always be resistance to any form of holiday. It is the nature of the capitalist system that people make money by selling the value of the production of their employees at a higher rate than they pay the employees for the value of that production. That's an immutable fact of capitalism. And there are always going to be some employers who resist and resent paying any amount of money more than they have to, or they feel they have to above the market rate. Nevertheless, if that logic was applied, and as articulated by Councillor King, then why would we have Christmas Day public holiday? Why would we have Queen's birthday? Why would we have any public holidays? And indeed, without the activities of unions and the labour movement, we wouldn't have annual leave, long service leave, sick leave. We would still have children in coal mines. So thank God that there are some of us who are more progressive minded and are true progressives, not petty bourgeoisie posers, and who actually care about working people and working families and have achieved these things. Thank you.
Councillor Cameron. Speaker for Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really must speak in support of this report and this recommendation. We have had fantastic feedback from our community, both as employers, but also as non-employers. And it is resoundingly clear from the report that there is support for this public holiday. In contrast to the suggestion that people from Albury don't stay in the hotels, I think people from outside of our community and our region come and stay in Albury for this festival. We encourage people to come and stay here because they come, they stay, they spend their money, they have a fantastic time. They increase the vibrancy within our community, which encourages our people to go out and have a fantastic time as well. We've been working as part of the 2030 program and for a number of iterations of council for the entire time I've been on council, and no less in this period of council, we've been wanting to encourage festivals and events. And there are a number of councillors, in fact, I think all of the councillors around the table tonight have spoken in support of festivals and events and encouraging that within our community because it's good for our people, but it's also good for bringing people into town to experience Albury and to spend their money. So I must speak in support of this. Having owned a small business, yes, it was difficult to make sure you had appropriate staff. Some people wanted to go to the races. People got the day off in our business, whether they wanted to go to the races or not. But we did have people come in and spend their money in our store, and it created a vibrancy, a talking point. And so I really must support this recommendation by the staff this evening and support the Albury Gold Cup and Carnival for our, not only the people of Albury, but for our region and indeed across New South Wales, because it is one of the most significant regional races in New South Wales now. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Speaker against, Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Cameron for the history lesson and also the economics lesson. Yes, it was excellent. And look, we seem to have a lot of public holidays in this country based on sport. We've got the Victorian public holiday for the grand final parade, and we've got the Melbourne Cup holiday, and we've got the Albury Gold Cup half day, and all relating to sport. And look, I like sport as much as the next person, but I don't know that we necessarily need a holiday for every sporting event we seem to have. I just want to put a slightly different angle on this because it actually happened a couple of years ago that for various reasons, the grand final holiday was on a Friday, and then there's the Melbourne Cup one was on a Tuesday, and on both of those days. on both.
Point
of
of
those.
order, councillor Blacken. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're not debating any public holidays in Victoria because they do not affect our city of Albury.
Very good point, councillor Blacken. Councillor Stutchbury, could you confine yourself to the NRL public holiday and other public holidays in New South Wales?
I
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
apologise. I apologise most sincerely to Councillor Blacken. I'm down on bended knee apologising. So the side effect of the half-day holiday is, which some of you may not be aware of, is that elective surgery in our public hospitals gets cancelled for this sporting holiday. So people, hard-working people, under the thumb of the oppressive boss, missing out on their hernia repair because of a horse race. So, I mean, that's just a minor point, but that's the point I'm making. Thanks.
Thank you, councillor Stutchbury. No speakers for. Another speaker against, councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I've consistently opposed this throughout this term of council, so I don't think my view would surprise any of the other councillors. I think to contribute to the debate, I do absolutely support a half-day public holiday, and I'd probably support a whole-day public holiday for something else. And I think there's a growing proportion of our population who don't support horse racing for a variety of reasons, and they deserve to have a voice in this chamber. I also think that the Albury Gold Cup is not a unique tourism offering for Albury. What we're saying by gazetting a public holiday for it is that we believe it's the most important event on the calendar, and that may have been the case in 1995, Councillor Cameron. I wouldn't know because I was 5, but I don't think it is anymore. And I think we should have a local public holiday for something that's more innovative and more inclusive. There's a cup or a gold cup in nearly every regional city in New South Wales, and there's even a Wodonga Cup. I think we should do something different. During the have a say period, I was contacted by people from various walks of life in the community with suggestions for other things that would make a great local public holiday. And that ranged from other sporting events like the O&M Grand Final weekend, celebrating our Indigenous culture. I remember the late Nancy Rourke once suggested a local public holiday for Wattle Day in acknowledgement of our Wiradjuri heritage, or whether that could be an arts and cultural local public holiday, for example, for the Right Around the Murray Festival. I think those things should be seriously considered. And if this motion is won tonight and we continue to have an Albury Gold Cup half-day public holiday for the next 2 years, I think the next council should really consider, at a minimum, just doing some consultation with the broader community about this. The question, it shouldn't be yes or no, do we want the Albury Gold Cup half-day public holiday? It's, do we want a half-day public holiday? And if so, what should that be celebrating? What brings us together? And I think when I look forward to the future and what the next generation want to enjoy in our city, it won't be a horse race anymore.
Thank you, councillor Con. No further questions. Just a question, Ms. Squire, and it should be something that you're very passionate about. I recall in this chamber, and I understand at the gate we have in the past taken postcodes to reflect the number of people that are actually going from Albury versus the people that don't have the holidays from Wodonga and other areas. Do you have any recollection of what that number or percentage was of the attendance on any given day we've taken that analysis on?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thanks for the question. I'm just turning my mind back to it, and you are correct. And I think the last time we did that was probably 2 years ago or maybe longer. The significant majority of attendees are actually people from the local area. So there are definitely people that come from outside of region to the Albury Gold Cup, and a lot of those are related to the corporate marquees and events that other elements that are on offer. But the significant proportion of attendees was actually from the Albury and Wodonga and surrounding areas from my memory, but I'm happy to circulate that to councils separately.
No worries. Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, do you wish to close debate?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Having heard both sides of the debate, I'm a little disappointed in the objections from a couple of our councillors who have indicated that they're not running for council at the December 4 elections. I was a bit confused with the opening statements from Councillor King. I thought he was actually speaking in support of the motion by, saying that the hotels are going to be full with people, but not necessarily from the local area, which I thought was a really good thing for our community to experience. But I can remember back in 2004, and as Councillor Glacken can, that when this issue came up before council, what had happened in the previous couple of years was that the council had refused, I think, the application at some stage, and the race club applied direct to the minister and got granted the public holiday anyway. So my rationale for supporting the public holiday at that time was the fact that let's make it a great event for Albury. Let's not be, a killjoy and make to be look like idiots by not supporting the public holiday and having the race club go direct to the minister to request the public holiday in the first place. I believe that was the correct. My summation of that is correct. I would stand to be corrected if that isn't the case. However, I think that this event is worthy of support with a half-day holiday. Councillor Stutchbury mentioned that we seem to have a lot of holidays for sporting events. Well, I reckon that's fantastic because sport does provide one of the few bright spots in our community in terms of the keeping us, if you like, slightly sane in terms of where we sit with pandemics and every other problem we face on a daily basis. So from that perspective alone, I think that the half-day holiday is supportable. And if you look at what's happened in Wodonga, they've now also climbed aboard and had a half-day holiday declared in Victoria. And that's on the back of us being successful with what we do with our thing. So in the spirit of the two city, one city cooperation, I think we need to keep our public holiday going. As a business owner, yes, I was also incurred, expense, but we managed to get around it by giving the people that came from Wodonga to work. They worked on the Albury public holiday half day, and the people that were then in Wodonga, they got either the Melbourne Cup holiday, or now they get the Wodonga holiday, and then the Albury people work on that day. So there was businesses that could get around the impact to a certain extent because we have to service both sides of the border. Be that as it may, I believe that the holiday deserves the support of the council, and we've, as a council, we've put a lot of effort into making this the marquee event on our sporting calendar. So yeah, it deserves further support. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderen. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Con would like her vote recorded. Would the other two persons speaking against wish their votes recorded? Councillor Stutchbury and Councillor King. Thank you. Okay. 13.8, the Albury Retail Sector Action Plan. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council endorses the Retail Sector Action Plan Stakeholder Engagement Plan.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, just to speak to that.
No, I think it's a great initiative that we go out and ask our retail sector how they're going and what's happening. And this is a good report.
Thank you. No further question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 13.9 is the Community and Cultural Grants Round 1, 2021-22. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Council A receives and notes the report, and B endorses the recommended 2021-22 Community and Cultural Grant Program Round 1 allocations as follows. Rachel McNamara Land of Snow and Ice Touring Set $3,000, Woolshed Saguna Land Care Group $3,000, Westside Community Centre $4,800, Michelle Fraccara The Liminal Collective $3,000, Albury Wodonga Creatives $3,000, Border Trust Community Foundation for Albury Wodonga Region $2,440, and Global Sisters $1,470.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron has a question before we open debate.
I'd just like a bit more background on number 4. Michelle, sorry,
Pissarro.
thank you. The pronunciation escapes me.
Councillor Con, what is the background you'd like?
I'm sorry, what's Councillor Con got to do?
She was on the committee.
Oh, I was going to ask you, Mr Mayor, through to you, to the most appropriate member of staff.
Okay, happy to take. Who would be the staff member
I'm
who
sure
would
the
take
staff
that
will
question?
provide me with a
Ms.
unbiased,
Squire, are you able to answer that?
professional opinion.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thanks for the question. Ms Code is actually on Zoom, so she'll be able to respond. Thank you.
Ms. Code, could you give Councillor Cameron a background in relation to Michelle Pissarro?
Have to call her. She's the same problem with the Zoom.
Hello,
can you hear me?
To the phones, man.
Hello,
To the
can
bat
you hear
phone.
me? To the bat phone. Hello.
Technology, don't you just love it?
I can hear you,
Well, you know, if
Simona,
we had a
but I
lot,
don't
we
think
would-
they can.
Thanks to me.
Simona speaking.
Simona, you're on now.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken can hear me, but it appears the rest of council can't.
They can now.
Thank you.
We can all hear it now.
Thank you. Apologies. I had to leave in the last minute to isolate due to a COVID notification. Shall I hang up the phone or can you hear me? Can you hear me as I'm speaking now?
Can hear you now. Just continue the way you're going.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cameron, for the question. And through you, Mr Mayor. Michelle Ferraco, the Liminal Collective, applied. It is an innovative arts project which looks at delivering partnerships with local artists to provide young people aged 5 to 12 and their parents or families with an appreciation to local arts and an understanding of arts. The applicant is provided some detail about how they're going to do it, and it should be well received by the local community, and certainly the community and cultural application panel thought it was a worthy application to proceed.
Councillor Cameron, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Very interesting.
Thank you, Ms. Code.
Thank you. Apologies if I'm echoing.
No, you're fine. Councillor Con, did you wish to open debate?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just firstly to say thank you to our community representatives who volunteered their time to participate in the panel, and that was Glenys Briggs from the Burrager Gallery and Renee Wilson from the Volunteer Resource Bureau. And obviously their input and their expertise in our cultural sectors and community sectors is really appreciated. Look, there's a number of projects on the list there. The panel agreed that these would offer significant benefits to the community. It's a significant surprise that the grants were slightly undersubscribed in this particular round, and historically that's certainly not the case. In previous rounds, chairing this panel has involved some really difficult decisions. And as the staff have outlined in the report, due to the COVID situation, there were a number of other grant programs that were one-offs that appeared around the same time as this round of our community and cultural grants program, that applicants who might in previous years have applied to us may have been successful in other state or federal government grants program. So the staff and I agree, believe that this will be back to very high demand in future, and hopefully we can continue to deliver some great projects for the community in partnership with those applicants.
Okay, thank you. There are no further speakers. Question, Councillor Cameron.
I'm just curious, through you, Mr Mayor, to the most appropriate member of staff, and I'm just refreshing my memory in terms of the community grants. I think I've answered through my own instant research, my own question. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Happy to put. Happy to.
You can be assured that it's very important.
Happy to put the motion. Thank you, councillors. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. 13.10 alcohol-free zones and alcohol-prohibited areas re-establishment. Councillor Vanderman.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll move the recommendation as a motion that Council A re-establishes an alcohol-free zone in the following areas until December 2022. 1, Albury Central Business Districts, and 2, Lavington Central Business Districts. B, re-establishes an alcohol-prohibited area in the following areas until December 2022. QE2 Square, so 1, QE2 Square and 2, Botanic Gardens. C, re-established as an alcohol prohibited area in Nuriel Park on Australia Day from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. D, proceeds to provide notice of the proposal to the community, the New South Wales Police, and each holder of a liquor licence bordering or adjacent to the zones and areas. And E, provides a further report to council reviewing all areas and zones beyond December 2022.
Thank you, councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Van, would you wish to speak to that?
I do, but can I ask a question through you first? Thank you. Through you to the most relevant member of staff. I notice from the map that is provided that the eastern side of Young Street is not included in the alcohol-free zone. I'm just a bit interested as to why that is, seeing that there is a liquor outlet in the Harris Farms area, and maybe that area of the street should be part of the alcohol-free zone. And also the railway precinct is not part of that alcohol-free zone. And I believe that it should be in terms of public consuming alcohol in public. So I'm just wondering whether that can be addressed, maybe not in this particular iteration of our alcohol-free zones, but in future iterations.
Ms Squire.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor Vanderven. You're absolutely right. And we have identified that area, particularly the public open space at the end of Dean Street in that railway corridor, we have also experienced some challenges with people consuming alcohol, for example, in the landscaped area at the front of the Visitor Information Centre. It would be our intention to include those areas for consideration and consultation with the community when we undertake that work in 2022. But just with the timing of when these are due to be renewed, and the change in council elections, we haven't been able to do that. But those areas are absolutely on the radar. And the other point would be that Harris Farm wasn't there when these areas were previously developed. But certainly we can take that all on notice and look to include that in the consultation moving forward.
Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question from councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm directing my question to the most appropriate member of staff. I'm not looking for an amendment to this now. I'm looking for the future of having a wider scope of being looked at of our areas. And these include the National Servicemen's Park down near Baker Motors, because there are, I'm just elaborating on that. There are 2 liquor outlets very close to that, and they are lacking in their control because people go across that park, drink, and then smash their bottles and leave them there for the mess for the community to clean up, and that's not good enough. The Star Hotel lacks people coming out of there with packaged beer. They're not supposed to do that. They walk down to the main business area, and on the way down there, they smash bottles, drop cans, and they urinate on private properties. And the final one I'd like to think about is the Albury War Memorial. It is a sacred site. Over the past, we've had too many occasions where people go up there and have a drink. They don't mind having a drink, but they drink to excess and probably cause damage. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, do you wish to open debate?
Yes, look, I think that these zones are important for our community to have some control over where people consume alcohol in public. I'd be interested to know, although it wouldn't change my attitude to this, it'd be interesting to know if there have been any, if you like, fines or seizure of alcohol take place in these preventative zones. But be that as it may, just to have the law there does provide us some options to stop that, what I consider to be a bit of antisocial behaviour. So I fully support the alcohol-free zones where we're going to put them. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Vanderman. Question from Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the relevant of staff, is there a mechanism where a delegation can be given to the CEO to implement and de-implement, I suppose, specific zones that may be troublesome in the short term, like what Councillor Doxey said, and that if we did not have to come to this situation of ratifying it, in a council meeting, that basically all of Albury could be a no alcohol-free zone, and then if there were certain areas that could be declassified for whatever reason, whether there's a function there or something like that, that we wouldn't have to come to a council meeting, that the CEO could actually designate that area.
Ms. Squire.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll ask Ms. Code if she's got anything to add. But my understanding is that council must resolve what those zones are and which category they fall into. And then they are presented then for ministerial approval. Ms. Code, would you like to provide any further comments, please?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. The current report in front of you seeks to re-establish, which means we cannot change anything. Once that is endorsed, and when we go out after.
Ms. Code, we can't hear you at this point. We need to ring you.
Sorry. Apologies. Under the current report in front of you, it is seeking to re-establish, which means we cannot change any of the zones. However, after that, when we go out to public consultation and we go through all the formal processes, we can certainly look at increasing as appropriate with evidence. And I'm sorry I'm echoing.
No worries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor King. Any further debate or questions? Doesn't appear to be. Happy to put the motion. All in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried.
So we'll have to do the same.
CM 14.1 infrastructure contributions reform and council submission. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council receives and notes the report on infrastructure contributions reform and council submission to the Honourable Rob Stokes, MP, Minister of Planning and Public Spaces.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman.
Very, very happy to second this motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, did you wish to speak to that?
I'll just reiterate the comments that I've previously made. This was a rush piece of legislation, poorly thought out, poorly explained, and I think just about every council in Australia, in New South Wales, has said so. And the committee that examined the bill also said, no, this cannot become legislation. It needs to be thought out. We can speculate on all sorts of things like cost shifting from New South Wales government onto local councils, but in the end, it was a poor piece of legislation and we've responded appropriately.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman speaking for the
I fully support the comments made by Councillor Thurley. This was basically, I've had a bit of time to watch Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister, just a few episodes, and this is a really courageous piece of legislation by Minister Stokes, because it's just not going to fly. It is just, it has the capacity to basically devastate infrastructure development in the whole of New South Wales in favour of putting, taking that money to improve infrastructure in Sydney, and that's just absolutely what they call a thin edge of the wedge. So I fully support Councillor Thurley and the well thought out staff a letter to the minister, because I think it encompasses all the issues that are that really come to light in this particular ill thought out piece of legislation. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Any other further speakers or questions? The only other thing that's left to say about it, though, is that if they take away the capacity of councils to raise money from developer corporate contributions, then the only way we can pay for infrastructure is to put ratepayers' rates up, which is again, in even any time is an absolute aberration. So you're right. I think it's just a grab for cash and there's no thought about the community. So thanks to the staff for their great report. Councillor Thurley, did you wish to close? Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Investment balance of September 21, Councillor Vanderman.
You're happy to move that the council receives and notes the investment balances report for the months of September 2021.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, did you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Fairly self-explanatory.
No questions or further debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 14.3, the June quarter budget review. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council receives and notes the analysis of Albury City's financial performance for the 2021 financial year compared to forecast.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that?
Just to note that it really highlights what a rocky year this has been. And I think overall it shows, that even through these tough times, we've managed the council finances pretty well.
Thank you. No speakers against. I would speaker for Councillor Cameron.
Thank you. Just to carry on from what Councillor Thurley said, it highlights that we are in the next period in front of this city and for the first time in a pretty tough situation compared to years gone by and the previous two terms of council. And it deeply troubles me that there are people highlighting their intentions to run for council with a whole range of what I consider zany proposals that will leave this city in, if they see the light of day, in deep financial trouble. Ideas like ripping up our flood mitigation scheme, which has been built up over many years and would cost many, many millions of dollars to give effect to. Not to mention the subject that I propounded earlier this evening of the attempt to resuscitate the chlorinated Palace of Versailles, the indoor aquatic centre, and even more unspecified and vague promises of some sort of centre down by the river. So these are troubling times that we live in.
Thank you. There are no further speakers for or against. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to close?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 14.4, the Albury City Our Future Strategy. Thank you. Councillor Vanderman.
Move the recommendation of motion the council receives and notes the draft Albury City Our Future Strategy 2021.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
2031, sorry, my apologies.
Thank you. Councillor
we're square now.
Did you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you. It's a good report and yep, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. No further discussion or debate. Have to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. And we have 14.5, the Youth Council update, July to September 2021. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council receives and notes the Youth Council's achievements as outlined in the July 2021 to September 2021 Youth Council summary report.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
I'd like to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Con, did you wish to speak to that?
Just briefly, Mr. Mayor, firstly to acknowledge our Youth Mayor, Eli Devon, and our Youth Deputy Mayor, Colby Baines, who've sat through a very long council meeting tonight to get up to this item on the agenda. Look, the Youth Council have been extraordinarily busy this year. They've met 26 times. They've made contributions to council plans like the Retro Cafe Review and the Mountain Bike Strategy, and also contributed to a multitude of events despite COVID restrictions in a really challenging year. And I think for most teenagers looking towards their HSCs, it's an achievement enough to get through the year and to get through your schooling. And this is a really outstanding group of young people who on top of all that are making, and I hope will continue to make significant contributions to Albury. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Con. Councillor Cameron wishes to speak for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to show my appreciation for the work done by the Youth Council and its members. They've worked very hard and they contribute without any or very little recompense and recognition. So we appreciate their efforts. I do feel, and it's no disrespect intended at all to the members of the Youth Council, but there's a structural area in which the Youth Council needs to be improved in the future in Albury. And I believe that attempts should be made to ensure that people who are selected for the Youth Council are selected on a democratic basis as far as possible by their peers. And I believe that could easily be done through the appointment of school prefects and captains, or whatever the modern equivalent nomenclature is. And democracy is a sacred thing. It's something that many people have defended with their lives, and lost a lot of lives have been lost in its defense. And it cannot be put too highly that democratic principles must adhere at all times where possible. And the current system whereby youth councillors are substantially selected by 2 councillors and a member of staff is not the best model, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Just a question from Councillor Glacken, who can't ask it, but more importantly, it's a perplexing question to do with our current outbreak. Given that there is a high percentage of young people that are not vaccinated, is there something the Youth Council could do to encourage that to occur? Last check was that 94% of all of Albury residents, including young people, were vaccinated with the first jab. I think that will naturally follow, but is there anything that the Youth Council could do to support that particular initiative? Ms. Squire.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor Glacken. I'm sure the team would be very happy to have a chat with Eli and the rest of our Youth Council members, given those, I guess, the evolving circumstances we find ourselves in over the last week. But we can certainly have some conversations around what we might be able to do and how Council can support the Youth Council to get those messages out there to the young people across our community.
Thank you. Just one final thing. It doesn't appear to be any more further questions or debate. I do too think the Youth Council have been very proactive and very much supportive of their peers during a very difficult period of time. And to have 26 meetings in the period this year is quite significant and encouraging. And I think they have given a lot of their time and energy into trying to assist us in the community to provide solutions for a lot of particular issues. And the Retro Cafe was mentioned, but the Graffiti Day and other things that they do are not just honorary things, they're actually things that the community see and their peers understand as being important. I think that, again, is a good sign for Albury City and certainly the youth councils of every year that we've had. But just as a personal note, I'd like to note Eli DeVern's effort at receiving the Order of Australia New South Wales Youth Community Service Award for his work in the Albury community. Eli, you're to be congratulated, and I did send you a letter indicating that, but more importantly in this public theatre, I'd like to also reinforce that our council are very proud of your achievements and thank you for your contribution to our community. Okay, happy to put the motion on this one. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Okay, we have delegates' reports for noting. Sam 15.1, Murray-Darling Association's report, October 2021. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Council receives and notes the Murray-Darling Association delegates' report for tabling at Council October 2021.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that?
I don't want to spend too much time. Each council has seen a copy of the delegates' report. I guess the two significant things happening. One, we're looking for a new CEO after Ms. Bradbury has retired, intending to retire after 7 years at the helm. I think the other one, the important other one, of course, is that we've constantly advocated for a voice of local government in any discussions around the Murray-Darling Basin Plan and water in the community. And up until now, that's fallen on deaf ears. But lately, we've made a submission to the Basin Officials Committee and written to a number of members of Parliament concerning funding for the Murray-Darling Association. I note that frequently large sums of money are spent on consultants providing reports to the MDBA, and they go out into communities and consult, and they write a report and charge an appropriate amount of money, often in the tens of thousands of dollars. The MDA provides that usually free of charge, and we're getting a bit tired of that. So we're asking whether they will provide some recurrent funding for the MDA and also look at the packet of projects that we've proposed for them to create jobs and build confidence to support government communities. And lastly, we want a seat at the table when water matters are being discussed. It's the one level of government that's had no say in the plan. And I suspect that that's why there are so many petty and minor problems with the plan, that they didn't get to the grassroots first. They started at the federal and state level and forgot about local government.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Any further question or debate for Councillor Thurley? Just to reiterate your words about the previous, the retirement of Emma Bradbury, David, known her since I started on council, and she has done a great job breathing life into the MDA. And I think, again, a lot of things have happened in that space in terms of not just water, but dealing with communities that have been affected by drought, floods, bushfire and pandemic. So she's to be congratulated, and her predecessor or the other applicant or successful applicant has got big shoes to fill. So thanks from all of us at Albury City and certainly Ramjo. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Okay, urgent business, councillors. Do we have any? Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very briefly. Sunday was Music in the Gardens. I'd like to congratulate Ros Walls and her team. They did an outstanding job again. 500 people came in. That was the quota, and it was an outstanding day. Disappointing for me. I've been attending now for the 8 odd years that they've been going. I don't see any other councillors or staff members there. Get moving. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further updates or urgent business? No? Okay, well, that concludes our business for this evening. Thank you, councillors, and thank you to the staff for their time.